there's a lot of definitions of paleo. You probably go to different books, different blogs, or whatever, and kind of someone says something a little bit different. So for the most part, I think it's individually finding what works for you. You'll hear about paleo plus dairy, paleo plus beans, paleo plus this and that. So we'll kind of cover some of that, and maybe we'll talk about dairy. What are some of the benefits? What are some of the downfalls of it? I think it's up to you to kind of say, you know what, that seems like something that would fit into my lifestyle. I'm okay with that. Now you get to a certain point where you're like, okay, paleo plus dairy plus beans plus wheat plus this plus that, and all of a sudden, okay, what's not paleo? So keep that in mind as well. But you know, we don't expect everyone to be like, all right, well, I'm gung ho, 100% paleo, this and that. So it kind of developed where, obviously, it's called paleo, so it's based off of what we ate in the paleo era, right? That is a great template, but that's not, set in stone. So just because we didn't consume, let's say milk, for instance, 50,000 years ago, because we didn't have domesticated cows, doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't. Right? So just because we didn't do it then doesn't mean we shouldn't do it now. So we'll talk about those types of things too. So for me, paleo is a good template to look at. You form these hypotheses about, okay, well, we didn't consume it then, so if we do it now, what does that do to my body? When you look at the evidence, you look at the research, and you say, okay, well, this, just because we didn't consume it 50,000 years ago, doesn't necessarily mean that I shouldn't consume it now. So that's how I kind of take the approach. So if there's something that I'm more lenient on, it's because I've kind of looked into it and said, hey, this is something that's probably okay. All right? First thing we're going to do, we're going to talk just a little bit about carbs in particular, but our macronutrients, our carbs, our proteins, our fats. Okay, those are the things that most everybody knows. Those are the three macronutrients. We're going to talk a lot about carbs first in relation to just your entire metabolic environment. So just like when we come to work out, or when we eat, or when we sleep, what we're really trying to do is kind of influence and control that environment. So your hormones play in hugely to your metabolism. And again, with what we eat affects our hormones. With how we work out affects our hormones. With how we sleep, respond to stress, all these things are affecting our hormones in some way. So yeah, you can't think, okay, control my hormones. You can't physically do that yourself, but with the environment that you provide yourself, you can control it. So instead of running 12 miles a day, you might come in here and do a workout that's 6 minutes long. So those two things have a drastically different effect on your hormones. We won't talk about exercise too much, but just so you kind of get that sense of that difference in that control. Same thing with sleep. If you get 2 hours of sleep last night, it's completely different in terms of the hormonal fluctuations as opposed to if you got 8. All right, so we're going to focus in on kind of the food and the metabolic environment in terms of hormones. So paleo, for the most part, because of the food that we eat, tends to be a little bit lower carb than the standard American diet. We try to limit grains, sugars, just your higher carb foods. And we'll just kind of go through the process of kind of carb metabolism and what happens in that hormonal environment. So when you eat, food goes into your stomach, it starts to break down. It actually starts to break down in your mouth first. Some of the enzymes in your saliva will start to break down, particularly starches. So if you're eating something really starchy, really sugary, that breakdown actually starts happening in your mouth. That's why you should chew a lot. They say you should chew 32 times. I don't know who does that. But that's what they say you should. So food goes into your stomach, it starts breaking down, and eventually it's going to make its way into your bloodstream. So when you eat some carbohydrates, they get broken down and they enter your bloodstream. So we're going to call these little blue dots blood sugar or blood glucose. Right? Same thing. Any carbohydrate that you eat, whether it's a sweet potato or a piece of bread or a candy bar, is going to turn into glucose and get into your bloodstream. No matter what kind of carbohydrate it is, it breaks down to glucose. So that's floating around in your blood. At any given time, right now, you guys all have about 1 teaspoon of blood sugar in your system. Your body tightly regulates that number. Right? So if you go to the doctor, they're going to test your fasting blood sugar, your fasting glucose. It's going to read out to be a number, maybe 80 to 100, or 70 to 100. If it's too much higher than that, they do you're diabetic, and so on and so forth. But at any given time, you have about 1 teaspoon of blood sugar. So, who remembers the old food pyramid? They used to recommend 6 to 11 servings of grain. Based off of a 2,000 calorie diet, they recommended 300 grams of carbohydrates a day. Right? 300 grams of carbohydrates, if you actually just converted that all to sugar, is about 2 cups of sugar. So if you eat 300 grams of carbs a day, that essentially equates to 2 cups of sugar into your system throughout the day. But your body is trying to regulate 1 teaspoon, which is a tiny little bit, right? So your body is very efficient at doing that, making sure that that number stays around 1 teaspoon all day long. Now, yeah, you'll kind of have some sugar rushes and some sugar crashes, but we're talking like minuscule amounts of difference between that 1 teaspoon. So if you decided to just guzzle, a 42-ounce Coke and a bucket of popcorn, we've all done it, at the movies, I'd be willing to say that'd be at least 200 grams of carbs. Out of a 42-ounce Coke and a big bucket of popcorn, probably 200 grams of carbs. So again, we're looking at almost 2 cups of sugar that you're putting into your body within a 2-hour span. Again, who doesn't go get refills, right? If you run out of soda, that's salty popcorn. So that is a big load, a big glycemic load or a big glucose load into the system at once. So your body goes into overdrive to put that sugar away. Because one of the most toxic things in your system is high blood sugar. Your body does not like high blood sugar. It's very damaging. It will damage your arteries. It's just very inflammatory. So your body's going to do everything that it can to get that blood sugar, again, in that 1 teaspoon range. So how does it do that? This is where the hormones come in. So your pancreas, this poor little guy right here, produces insulin. Insulin is released when the body notices that it's got high blood sugar. So you eat that carb meal, your blood sugar starts to go up, and all of a sudden your pancreas is like, all right, insulin, come into the blood. So insulin is released into the blood. Insulin has a job. It's called the storage hormone. Its job is to lower your blood sugar, again, because the body thinks that's toxic. It's got to do something about it. So it's going to take that sugar, or those glucose molecules, and it's going to do one of a couple different things. It may push it into a muscle. It may push it into a fat cell, or it may shoot it over here to the liver. Okay? Now, at any given time, it's probably doing a little bit of all of that. Okay? If, let's say, you had a high-carb meal and you go to work out, okay, you do something active, your muscles will actually pull that sugar in without insulin's help. That's one of the things that exercise is really good at. Pulls that glucose in without any insulin. Okay? What else? So we've got a fat cell right here. Okay, and they're all over the body. Okay, it doesn't matter where they're at. But they have a couple of different enzymes on them. Okay, these really funny squiggly looking ones going to the outside are called lipoprotein lipase, and the ones inside are hormone sensitive lipase. They have completely different jobs. So the ones out here, their job is to reach out and grab fatty acids and sugar and pull them into the cell. Insulin turns these guys on. Now, if these guys are on, then the ones on the inside of the cell have to turn on. It's basically like a light switch. So in the presence of insulin, lipoprotein lipase is activated or expressed. It's turned on. If it's on, the hormone-sensitive lipase is turned on. Hormone-sensitive lipase is on the inside of the cell, and it's breaking down triglycerides into free fatty acids and then putting it back into the bloodstream to be used as energy. Okay? So when insulin is high, this enzyme is active, causing you to store and accumulate fat. When insulin is low, then hormone-sensitive lipase is activated and turned on, so we're promoting fat breakdown, which is good. And what raises insulin? Blood sugar. What raises blood sugar? Carbohydrates. Right? So the effect of a higher carb diet is increasing your carbs, increasing your blood sugar, increasing your insulin, increasing the demand on the system overall, which is going to promote more of a fat storage state. Are we all pretty much on the
Sugar bad.
Sugar bad.
Why is it trying to live like lower carb? Why? At what point is it to that? Because I've gotten below like 20 and feel poor. I'm just curious.
Okay. So when you eat this food and you're filled with higher ends of blood sugar, your body gets really adjusted to that, and that's what it sees as its energy source. So when you have a lot of sugar in your blood, it doesn't matter what you're doing, sleeping, running, sitting there, your body has that available energy source. If you have sugar in your system and in your blood, that is the preferred source because it's really quick. You can make energy out of that sugar very, very quickly. So your body is pretty quick at making it. It doesn't necessarily prefer to do that, but again, if sugar is in your system, it's going to go there first. So if you go low carb, and you're like, all right, all of a sudden I'm going low carb, eventually you're going to kind of run out of your stored sugar. Now you'll store a lot of sugar in your liver, okay, so these little hash mark thingies. That would be glycogen, which is just linked to glucose. So your blood sugar just kind of links up with other blood sugars, and it goes and it just sits, it's stored in the liver. So let's say a normal diet, decent amount of carbs, so your liver glycogen is pretty much full. And you also have glycogen in your muscles, okay, so it kind of gets stored there as well. Now, when we go low carb, all of a sudden, well, we start using some of that muscle glycogen. It starts to get used up. Then you have to go to liver glycogen. Some of that liver glycogen gets used up. And now the body is saying, my glycogen stores are gone, my blood sugar is pretty low, so I'm on a low carb diet, what am I going to use for energy? It has to figure something out. It's going to go to fat metabolism. Okay? It's going to start using fatty acids, and this hormone-sensitive lipase is going to be going crazy, just putting fatty acids in your bloodstream for energy. But for some people, that takes a while. It's a process. Usually it's like 2 days to 2 weeks. So if you're the type of person that goes through the kind of that low carb flow, you feel like you've got a headache, you're tired all the time, this and that. It's your body trying to figure out how to create some energy. And some people are really efficient at it. It just takes them, a day of going low carb, and all of a sudden they're burning fat.
I hate those people, Enrique, and I'm not trying to say anything about anybody, but no, I don't know anybody like Enrique, but
Or Jeremy.
love those people.
And the worst thing about it is, when you feel like that, that's driving you to want some immediate energy. So it drives you to, something that's going to kind of spike your blood sugar, make you feel normal. And then you notice that, you're like, okay, that makes me feel better. So the body starts to crave those kinds of things, so it continues to do it. So it's kind of about pushing through that.
So what do you do to get through that? Do you start doing protein?
I mean, you basically just kind of have to say,
Suck it up.
This is how I
Yeah, I'm done with
Or how much work out? That's the thing. I mean, it's like, this.
Your body's going to find energy somewhere, somehow, but it's about how much you're willing to kind of endure to get there. Does that make sense? So you kind of have to push through. But again, if you're low carb for 2 days, and like I feel like crap, and then you have Gatorade because you feel like that workout was so bad, I need to replenish my sugars. You take that sugar in, right, and all of a sudden you're back to this. The body's going to say, "Oh, I remember you." It doesn't take long to readjust to that. You're like, okay, thank you. And then the next time, it's,
Now you gotta go back